The metallic click of a Glock 19 being chambered echoed through the Red Wolf Motorcycle Club like thunder in a silent cathedral. Angela Martinez, 42 years old in blood-stained blue scrubs from her overnight emergency room shift, stood perfectly still among 18 bikers who had been laughing and drinking just seconds before. "I'm here for my son," she announced, her voice cutting through the deafening rock music and clinking beer bottles like a blade through silk. The weapon in her hands remained steady as granite, her finger positioned professionally outside the trigger guard, not the desperate grip of an amateur. Club President Viper Thompson, 6'3", with silver hair and a facial scar running from ear to chin, slowly rose from his leather chair at the end of the bar. Behind him, a collection of weapons mounted on the wall glinted under the harsh neon lights. Pool balls stopped clicking. Conversations died mid-sentence. Every pair of eyes in the smoky room fixed on the small woman who had just walked into their world uninvited. "Lady, I think you got the wrong address," Viper said, his voice carrying the casual authority of a man who had never been challenged in his own territory. "Hospital's about 10 miles that way." The room exploded in harsh laughter. Tank Rodriguez, the club's enforcer at 250 pounds, with tattooed knuckles spelling pain, slammed his beer bottle onto the bar top hard enough to make the wood shudder. "Maybe somebody should call an ambulance for this crazy lady." More laughter rippled through the crowd, but Angela didn't flinch. Her brown eyes swept the room in what looked like casual observation, but was actually a tactical assessment. Corners, exits, weapons, potential threats, performed with the automatic precision of someone trained for combat situations. Her breathing remained controlled, despite the obvious exhaustion etched into her face. "Tommy Martinez, 19 years old, missing for 72 hours, she stated with military precision, each word delivered like a hammer blow. "Last seen leaving this club with blood on his hands and terror in his eyes." The laughter faltered slightly. Several bikers exchanged glances, but Viper's expression remained unchanged. He gestured casually to his treasurer, Snake Williams, a wiry man with prison tattoos covering both arms. Snake stepped forward, his phone already in hand. "Don't know any Tommy," Snake declared, scrolling through what appeared to be social media. "No Martinez on our guest list. You sure you got the right place, sweetheart?" Angela's grip on her weapon shifted almost imperceptibly, not aggressive, but ready. The subtle movement caught the attention of Doc Peterson, the club's medic, who sat in the corner nursing a whiskey. Something about her stance triggered a memory he couldn't quite place. Desert, sand, the particular way someone held a weapon when they'd used it for more than target practice. "His motorcycle is in your parking lot," Angela continued, her voice never rising above conversational level, but somehow carrying to every corner of the room. "Blue Kawasaki, license plate 7XR942. Still warm when I checked it 20 minutes ago." Tank pushed off from the bar, his massive frame casting a shadow across Angela's position. "Lady, I don't care if you found the Hope Diamond out there. This is private property, and you're trespassing with a weapon. Time to leave." Instead of backing down, Angela shifted her weight slightly, a movement so subtle most people missed it, but Doc Peterson didn't. His weathered fingers tightened around his glass as recognition began to dawn. That wasn't fear in her posture, that was professional readiness. If watching a desperate mother confront 18 dangerous men over her missing son doesn't make your blood boil, you haven't been paying attention. Hit that like button right now to support parents who refuse to give up. Subscribe to the channel and smash that thanks button below. Your support helps me continue telling stories about the quiet heroes walking among us, because sometimes the most dangerous person in the room is the one everyone underestimates. The tension in the room ratcheted up another notch as Angela took a small step to her left, keeping her back toward the wall, a tactical position that allowed her to observe the entire room while limiting approaches. The movement was so smooth, so automatic, that it was clear she had done it thousands of times before. "Where is my son?" she repeated, and this time there was something in her voice that made even Tank hesitate. Not desperation, not fear, something harder. Something that suggested she'd asked that question before, in places where the wrong answer carried consequences. Razor Pete, the sergeant-at-arms, stood up from his pool game, cue stick still in hand. "Ma'am, you need to calm down and think about what you're doing here. This is a room full of grown men who don't appreciate threats." "I'm not threatening anyone," Angela replied calmly. "I'm asking a question. Where is Tommy Martinez?" Viper chuckled, but the sound had lost some of its earlier confidence. "Listen, lady." "Angela," she corrected, maintaining perfect muzzle discipline as she spoke. My name is Angela Martinez. Tommy is my son, and somebody in this room knows exactly where he is. The club president studied her for a long moment, his calculating gaze taking in details he'd missed before. The way she stood with both feet planted firmly, but weight slightly forward, the professional grip on her weapon, the fact that her hands weren't shaking, despite what should have been overwhelming fear. Angela, he repeated slowly, that's a pretty name. Tell me, Angela, what makes you think we'd know anything about your boy? Because Detective Luis Morales was investigating your club for federal racketeering charges, Angela said, her voice cutting through the smoky air like a scalpel. Because Tommy was working part-time at the garage down the street and saw something he shouldn't have seen. And because 24 hours after Detective Morales disappeared, my son stopped answering his phone. The room went dead silent, except for the distant sound of motorcycles on the street outside. Snake's phone slipped from suddenly nerveless fingers, clattering onto the floor. Tank's cocky grin faded as several club members shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Doc Peterson set down his whiskey with deliberate care and stood up slowly. Something was clicking into place in his memory. Fragments of conversations, whispered names, stories told in VA hospital waiting rooms about female medics who'd served in places where courage was measured in lives saved under fire. That's a serious accusation, Viper said carefully, his earlier casual demeanor evaporating. You might want to be careful about throwing around words like federal investigation in a place like this. Angela's response was to reach into her scrubs pocket with her free hand, moving slowly, deliberately, giving everyone time to see she wasn't going for another weapon. She pulled out a crumpled piece of paper and held it up. Tommy's work schedule, she announced, shows he was supposed to work a double shift yesterday. His supervisor says he never showed up, never called, never answered his phone. Tommy has never missed a day of work without calling. Ever. She paused, letting that sink in, then continued. His last text to me was at 11:15 p.m. Tuesday night. Just 3 words. Mom, need help. Since then, nothing. Phone goes straight to voicemail. GPS tracker disabled. Bank account untouched. The paper fluttered slightly in the air conditioning, but Angela's hands remained steady. Bone Martinez, the road captain who'd been trying to stay out of the conversation, cleared his throat nervously. Ma'am, maybe there's been some kind of misunderstanding. Sometimes young men... Don't, Angela cut him off, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. Don't you dare suggest my son is off partying somewhere while I'm going crazy with worry. I know my boy, and I know when something is wrong. Tank took another step forward, his patience clearly exhausted. Lady, I don't care if you're the Virgin Mary herself. You walked into our house, pointed a gun at us, and started making accusations. Time for you to leave. Now. Instead of backing down, Angela shifted into what anyone with military training would recognize as a defensive stance. Weight balanced, weapon ready, but not aggressive. Her left foot moved back 6 inches, her right shoulder dropped slightly, and suddenly she looked like someone who could actually use the Glock in her hands. I'm not leaving without my son, she stated flatly. And before you try to take this weapon from me, you should know that I've had exactly 4 hours of sleep in the past 48 hours. I've lost 13 pounds worrying about Tommy, and I have absolutely nothing left to lose. The silence that followed was electric with tension. Then Snake made his move, lunging forward to grab the gun from Angela's grip. What happened next would be talked about in the Red Wolf clubhouse for years to come. Angela's response was instantaneous and professional. She stepped back at precisely the right angle to avoid his grab, while simultaneously transitioning from low, ready to high-ready position. The movement was so smooth, so perfectly executed, that it was clear she'd done it countless times before. Don't test me, she warned, her voice carrying the edge that made several bikers reach instinctively for their own weapons. Tank immediately moved to flank her from the right, but Angela's head turned to track his movement, while keeping her primary focus on the larger group. Her situational awareness was remarkable, the kind that came from training in environments where losing track of threats meant dying. Easy, everyone, Doc Peterson called out, raising his hands in a peaceful gesture. Something was nagging at him, a memory that wouldn't quite surface. Let's all take a step back here, but Tank wasn't interested in de-escalation. Nah, Doc, this crazy witch walked into our house and... He never finished the sentence. As he moved within arm's reach, Angela demonstrated a weapon retention technique that sent him stumbling backward, cursing and holding his wrist. The move was subtle, economical, and devastatingly effective. Exactly what someone would learn in advanced military training. "Holy cow," whispered one of the younger club members. "Did you see that?" Doc Peterson definitely saw it, and suddenly, fragments of memory began connecting. The stance, the weapon handling, the way she moved like violence was just another tool in her toolkit, to be used precisely and without hesitation when necessary. As if summoned by the rising tension, the club's bartender Maria Santos emerged from the back room, took one look at the scene, and immediately reached for the phone behind the fur. "I'm calling the police," she announced. "No police," Viper snapped, his authority reasserting itself. "We handle this ourselves." Angela's laugh was bitter and sharp. "Please do call the police. I'm sure they'd be very interested in searching this place, especially with an active federal investigation into Detective Morales' disappearance." The mention of federal investigation sent another ripple of unease through the room. Several members exchanged meaningful glances, and Tank, still nursing his wrist, shot a questioning look at Viper. It was then that Maria noticed something that made her blood run cold. Angela's scrubs weren't just stained with blood from her hospital shift. There were fresh stains, still wet, that looked suspiciously like they might be her own. "Ma'am," Maria said carefully, "are you hurt? Do you need medical attention?" Angela glanced down at herself as if just noticing the blood. "Occupational hazard. I work emergency trauma. Sometimes you don't have time to change between cases." But Doc Peterson was studying those stains with professional interest. Some were definitely old, the brown oxidized color of blood that had been there for hours, but others were bright red, fresh, and they were in places that suggested they might not be from patients. "What kind of work do you do at the hospital?" he asked quietly. "Whatever needs doing," Angela replied. "Trauma surgery, emergency medicine, crisis intervention, 23 years of keeping people alive when everyone else has given up on them." The number hit Doc like a physical blow. 23 years. That would put her starting in the military during some of the heaviest combat years. The pieces were starting to fit together in his mind, and what they formed was both impressive and terrifying. A young biker known as Tiny chose that moment to lean against a broken beer bottle on the bar, slicing his palm open on the jagged glass. He cursed and held up his bleeding hand, looking around for help. Angela's response was immediate and instinctive. Without thinking, she stepped forward, her weapon automatically shifting to a safe position as her medical training took over. "Direct pressure, elevate above heart level," she barked, in a voice that carried absolute authority. The entire room froze as they watched her professional assessment of the injury. Her eyes scanned the wound with clinical precision, automatically categorizing severity, blood flow, and treatment requirements. This wasn't bedside manner. This was field medicine. "It's not deep," she announced after a 3-second examination. "Needs cleaning and butterfly sutures, nothing that requires stitches." Tiny stared at her in amazement. "How can you tell all that just by looking?" "Experience," Angela replied simply, but something in her tone suggested that experience had been earned in places where quick medical assessments meant the difference between life and death. Doc Peterson's suspicions crystallized into certainty. "Where did you serve?" he asked quietly. Angela's head snapped toward him, her eyes narrowing. For the first time since entering the clubhouse, she looked genuinely surprised. "Excuse me? You heard me," Doc pressed. "That's not civilian medical training. That's field medicine, combat medicine. So, where did you serve?" The question hung in the air like smoke from a fired gun. Every person in the room was watching Angela's face, waiting for her response. But instead of answering, she asked a question of her own. "What makes you think I served anywhere?" Tank, recovered from his earlier encounter, laughed harshly. "Because Doc here is a Vietnam vet, and he knows the difference between book learning and the real thing. Question is, what's a military medic doing working at a civilian hospital?" Angela's smile was cold and humorless. "Same thing as any veteran, I imagine, trying to find a place in the world that doesn't involve people shooting at each other." But the damage was done. The seed of doubt had been planted, and now everyone was looking at her differently. The desperate mother was still there, but underneath that, something else was becoming visible. Something harder. Something dangerous. Viper stepped forward, his earlier casual demeanor replaced by the focused attention of a predator who'd suddenly realized he might not be at the top of the food chain. "You know what I think?" he said slowly. "I think there's more to this story than a missing boy." Angela met his gaze steadily. "There's always more to every story, but Tommy is all that matters to me right now. Where is he?" It was Razor Pete who noticed the surveillance van first. He'd been glancing out the window periodically, a habit born from years of running with clubs that attracted law enforcement attention. But this time, what he saw made his blood turn cold. "Viper," he called out urgently. "We got company. Black van, tinted windows, parked across the street, looks federal." The effect was immediate and electric. Weapons appeared from seemingly nowhere, pistols from waistbands, shotguns from behind the bar, rifles from hidden compartments. The relaxed atmosphere of moments before transformed into a tense standoff as club members took defensive positions throughout the room. But Angela didn't move. She stood perfectly still in the center of the chaos, her weapon steady, her breathing controlled, watching the panic unfold around her with the calm assessment of someone who'd been in worse situations and survived. You think Angela is overreacting, or does she have valid reasons to suspect these bikers? Comment below and let us know what you think. Snake had his phone out, frantically trying to coordinate with other club members. "All units, we got federal surveillance, possible raid incoming," he barked into the device. That's when Angela did something that made everyone stop and stare. In a voice that carried absolute military authority, she commanded, "All stations, stand down." The words cut through the chaos like a knife. Not the desperate plea of a civilian in over her head, but the crisp command of someone accustomed to being obeyed without question. Snake's hand froze halfway to his radio, his mouth hanging open in shock. "Who the hell do you think you are?" Tank demanded, but his voice lacked its earlier confidence. Instead of answering, Angela reached into her scrubs pocket again, this time pulling out what looked like a military ID holder. She didn't open it, just held it where everyone could see it, letting the implications sink in. Doc Peterson was studying her face intently now, memory and recognition warring in his expression. Something about her bearing, her voice, the way she'd taken command of the situation was triggering memories of stories he'd heard. Stories about female medics who'd served in the most dangerous combat zones, who'd saved lives under impossible conditions, who'd earned decorations that were classified too high for most people to ever know about them. "Ma'am," he said carefully, "I think we need to talk." Angela's response was interrupted by the sound of car doors slamming outside. Through the grimy windows, they could see figures moving in tactical formation, approaching the building with the methodical precision of federal agents executing a warrant. "This is it," Snake hissed, checking his weapon. "They're coming in hot." But Angela surprised everyone again by walking calmly to the window and looking out at the approaching figures. What she saw there made her close her eyes for a moment, as if in relief. "Stand down," she called to the club members. "All of you, right now." "Like hell," Tank snarled, raising his shotgun. "I'm not going to prison without a fight." Angela turned from the window, and for the first time since entering the clubhouse, her professional mask slipped slightly. What showed through was exhaustion, relief, and something that might have been hope. "You're not going to prison at all," she said quietly. "Not today. But if you raise weapons against federal agents, that's going to change very quickly." Viper stepped closer to the window, peering out at the tactical team forming up outside. "How do you know what they're here for?" Angela's smile was tired, but genuine. "Because I called them." The admission hit the room like a thunderbolt. Weapons that had been pointing toward the windows suddenly swung toward Angela, but she didn't flinch. If anything, she looked calmer than she had since walking through the door. "You did what?" Viper's voice was deadly quiet. "I called Agent Sarah Kim of the Federal Bureau of Investigation," Angela replied matter-of-factly. "Told her I had information about Detective Morales' disappearance and requested federal protection for a witness." Tank's face was purple with rage. "You treacherous witch! You set us up!" "No," Angela corrected firmly. "I gave you every opportunity to tell me where Tommy is. You chose to play games instead. So I called in professionals." As if on cue, the front door of the clubhouse opened, and Agent Sarah Kim stepped inside, followed by a tactical team in full gear. She was a small woman, barely 5'4", but she carried herself with the absolute authority of someone who could call down the full weight of the federal government with a single radio call. "Good evening, gentlemen," she said politely, her voice carrying easily through the tense silence. "I'm Agent Kim, FBI. We have a federal warrant for the arrest of Vincent Viper Thompson on charges of murder in the first degree." The words hit the room like a physical blow. Several club members took involuntary steps backward, while others gripped their weapons tighter. But it was Viper himself who seemed most shocked by the announcement. "Murder?" he repeated. "What murder?" Agent Kim smiled tortly. Detective Luis Morales, undercover federal agent. Found dead this morning in a drainage ditch 12 miles from here, tortured and executed with a single shot to the head. Tank spun toward Angela, his face twisted with fury. You knew all along. I knew Detective Morales was investigating your club, Angela confirmed. I knew my son had been asking questions about strange men hanging around his workplace. And I knew that both of them disappeared within 24 hours of each other. The rest I left to the professionals. Agent Kim stepped further into the room, her tactical team spreading out to cover exits and potential threats. Where is Thomas Martinez? She asked, her tone making it clear that this wasn't a request. Safe, Angela answered before anyone else could speak. Isn't he? The agent nodded. Federal protection. He's been in a safe house since we picked him up 48 hours ago. He witnessed the murder and called 911. We've been trying to contact you, but your hospital said you were working back-to-back shifts. Angela's knees nearly buckled with relief. The weapon in her hand suddenly felt impossibly heavy, and for the first time in 72 hours, she allowed herself to believe that her son was actually safe. He's alive, she whispered, more to herself than anyone else. Very much alive, Agent Kim confirmed, and very worried about his mother, who disappeared from the hospital 3 hours ago after telling her supervisor she was going to handle this herself. Doc Peterson was watching the exchange with growing understanding. The pieces were all fitting together now. The tactical knowledge, the weapon handling, the way she'd walked into a room full of dangerous men without showing fear. Angela Martinez wasn't just a desperate mother. She was something else entirely. Agent Kim, he called out respectfully. Ma'am, if I may ask, how long have you been looking for Mrs. Martinez? The FBI agent glanced at him, then back at Angela. Since about 6 hours after she left the hospital, we've had teams checking every location we thought she might go. But you came here, Angela observed. Why here specifically? Agent Kim's smile was grim. Because Detective Morales reported this club as the center of his investigation. Because your son's last known location was the garage across the street. And because federal surveillance picked up your vehicle in this parking lot about 40 minutes ago. Snake, who had been silent since the agents entered, suddenly spoke up. Wait a minute. If the kid's been in federal protection this whole time, why didn't anybody tell her? Why let his mother go crazy thinking he was dead? Agent Kim's expression softened slightly as she looked at Angela. Because we've been trying to find her for 3 days. Mrs. Martinez has been working 18-hour shifts, sleeping in on-call rooms, and apparently not checking her personal phone or answering her apartment door. Angela pulled her phone from her pocket and stared at it in disbelief. The battery was dead, completely drained. She'd been so focused on finding Tommy that she hadn't even noticed. My charger broke Tuesday night, she said numbly. I've been using the hospital phones for everything. The irony was almost too much to bear. While she'd been risking her life confronting dangerous bikers, federal agents had been trying to reach her to tell her that Tommy was safe, all because of a dead phone battery and her own desperate determination to find her son. Viper, meanwhile, was staring at Agent Kim with the expression of a man whose world had just collapsed around him. You're saying Morales was federal? That punk who came around asking questions about our business? Detective Luis Morales, undercover federal agent, assigned to investigate racketeering, money laundering, and suspected connections to interstate drug trafficking, Agent Kim confirmed. He'd been working this case for 8 months when you killed him. I didn't kill anybody, Viper protested, but his voice lacked conviction. Agent Kim pulled out a tablet and showed him surveillance footage. Federal agents photographed you meeting with Morales at the diner on Highway 7 Tuesday night, witnessed you arguing, followed you both back here, lost visual when you went inside, but found his body the next morning. The footage was grainy but clear enough. Even from across the room, everyone could see Viper and another man in heated conversation, followed by both of them getting into separate vehicles and driving toward the club. Tank's face had gone pale. Viper, tell me you didn't— Shut up, Tank, Viper snapped, but the fight was going out of him. The evidence was overwhelming, and he knew it. Angela watched the scene unfold with a mixture of relief and something approaching professional satisfaction. Justice was being served, her son was safe, and the dangerous game she'd been playing was finally coming to an end. But then Agent Kim said something that changed everything. Mrs. Martinez, we need to talk, privately, about your service record. The words dropped into the sudden silence like stones into still water. Every eye in the room turned toward Angela, who had gone very still at the agent's words. "My service record?" Angela repeated carefully. "Yes, ma'am, because according to our background check, Angela Martinez never served in the military, never had any weapons training, never received any medical training outside of civilian nursing school." Agent Kim paused, studying Angela's face intently. "Which makes your performance here tonight very interesting." Doc Peterson was nodding slowly, pieces of a puzzle finally clicking into place in his mind. "I knew there was something familiar about you. The way you move, the way you handle yourself under pressure. That's not civilian training." Angela looked around the room at the faces watching her, some hostile, some curious, some respectful. These men had underestimated her from the moment she walked through their door. They'd seen a desperate mother and missed the warrior underneath. Now Agent Kim was looking at her with the same calculating expression, clearly seeing something that didn't match the official records. "There seems to be a discrepancy in your background," the agent continued. "Would you care to explain why a civilian nurse displays tactical skills that would make most of my agents envious?" Angela glanced at the weapon still in her hands, then at the faces surrounding her. She'd come here looking for her son and ended up in the middle of a federal investigation. But there was still one more secret to be revealed, one more truth that would change how everyone in this room saw her. As Tank gripped his injured wrist and stared at her with new understanding, as Doc Peterson nodded with growing recognition, as Agent Kim waited for an answer that would explain the impossible, Angela Martinez made a decision that would alter the course of everything that followed. The torn fabric of her scrubs caught on her tactical vest as she shifted position, and in that moment, everyone realized that underneath the blood-stained hospital uniform was something else entirely. Something that suggested Angela Martinez had been prepared for a very different kind of confrontation than anyone had imagined. But that revelation, and the truth about who Angela Martinez really was, would have to wait. Because Agent Kim's radio was crackling with urgent communication, and the federal operation that had been planned for weeks was about to reach its explosive conclusion. The night was far from over. Agent Kim's radio crackled with urgent static before a voice cut through the tension. "Control to team leader. We have movement at the rear exit. Multiple subjects attempting to flee on motorcycles." The FBI agent's expression hardened as she pressed her earpiece. "Copy that. All units maintain perimeter. No one leaves until we sort this out." Angela watched the exchange with growing unease. Something in Agent Kim's tone suggested this operation was bigger than just arresting Viper for Detective Morales' murder. The tactical team was too large, too well coordinated for a simple homicide. "So, Agent Kim," Angela said carefully, "exactly what kind of investigation are we talking about here?" Before the agent could respond, Tank made his move. The massive biker lunged toward the back exit, apparently deciding that federal prison was preferable to whatever was about to unfold in the clubhouse. But as he reached for the door handle, something stopped him cold. The distinctive metallic sound of multiple weapons being readied echoed from outside. Tank's hand froze on the door as red laser dots appeared on his chest through the grimy window. "I wouldn't," Agent Kim advised calmly. "We have the building surrounded." Angela felt the tactical vest beneath her scrubs shift as she moved, the unfamiliar weight a constant reminder of how far outside her normal world she'd traveled tonight. The hospital seemed like a lifetime ago, though it had been less than 4 hours since she'd walked out of the emergency room and into this nightmare. Doc Peterson was still studying her with that look of growing recognition. "Ma'am, I served 3 tours in Vietnam. Saw a lot of combat medics come and go. You've got the bearing." "The bearing?" Angela repeated. "The way you carry yourself. The way you assessed that cut on Tiny's hand. The way you handled Tank when he got aggressive." Doc paused, his weathered face creasing with concentration. "That's not something you learn in nursing school." Agent Kim was listening to the exchange while coordinating with her team through her earpiece. But Angela could see that she was also paying close attention to every word being said about her background. Snake, meanwhile, had gone very quiet. Too quiet. Angela's trained eye caught I am slowly reaching for something behind the bar, his movements careful and deliberate. Without thinking, she shifted her position to get a better angle on his location. "Snake," she called out sharply. "Hands where I can see them." The authority in her voice was unmistakable. Not a request, not a plea, an order given by someone accustomed to being obeyed without question. Snake's hand froze and he slowly raised both hands above the bar. Agent Kim raised an eyebrow. "Impressive situational awareness, Mrs. Martinez." 23 years of emergency medicine teaches you to watch for trouble, Angela replied, but her voice lacked conviction. The excuse was wearing thin, and everyone in the room could sense it. Viper, who had been silent since the murder charges were read, suddenly spoke up. You know what I think? I think our friend Angela here isn't exactly who she claims to be. Meaning, Agent Kim prompted, meaning civilian nurses don't move like special forces operators. They don't handle weapons like they were born with them in their hands. And they sure don't walk into rooms full of armed bikers and take control like they own the place. Angela felt the weight of every stare in the room. The moment of truth was approaching whether she wanted it or not, but before she could respond, her torn scrubs caught on her tactical vest again, this time pulling the fabric away from her shoulder. What happened next would be burned into the memory of everyone present for the rest of their lives. The fabric tore completely, revealing not just the tactical vest, but what lay beneath it. Tattooed across Angela's left shoulder in stark black ink was an image that made Doc Peterson's whiskey glass slip from his fingers and crash to the floor. An eagle, wings spread wide, talons gripping a sniper rifle, but it was the details that made hardened bikers take involuntary steps backward. The eagle's eyes were hollow, dead, speaking of loss and sacrifice beyond imagination. Each feather was rendered with precision that matched Angela's shooting stance. And if you looked closely, each major feather contained a small initial worked into the design. Below the eagle, in crisp military lettering, were the words, 160th Special Operations Aviation Regiment. And beneath that, smaller but still visible, death waits in the dark. The silence that followed was absolute. Even Agent Kim's radio traffic seemed to fade into background noise as every person in the room processed what they were seeing. Angela reached slowly into her scrubs pocket and pulled out a military service grid. It hit the floor with a metallic click that seemed to echo forever in the sudden stillness. Doc Peterson was the first to recover. With movements stiff from age and respect, he stood at attention and rendered a perfect military salute. Special Operations Aviation Regiment, he said, his voice thick with emotion. Ma'am? Angela's encrypted smartphone features military-grade titanium-reinforced screen capable of maintaining secure satellite communications, even in combat environments where standard civilian devices would fail completely under extreme conditions. Keep watching. One small detail is about to change everything in this room. The reaction was immediate and visceral. Tank, who had been ready to fight federal agents, slowly backed away from Angela as if she'd suddenly become radioactive. Snake's hands remained frozen above his head, but now his face had gone pale as death. Even Razor Pete, who had been gripping his pool cue like a weapon, carefully set it aside. Agent Kim bent down and picked up the military service card, studying it with professional interest. Specialist Angela Martinez, Flight Medic, 160th Special Operations Aviation Regiment. She looked up at Angela with new understanding. The Night Stalkers. Former Night Stalker, Angela corrected quietly. I've been out for 5 years. But Doc Peterson was shaking his head in amazement. Ma'am, there's no such thing as a former Night Stalker. Once you've served with the 160th, you carry that with you forever. Agent Kim was still studying the service card, cross-referencing it with something on her tablet. According to this, you served 6 tours in Afghanistan and 3 in Iraq. Purple Heart, Bronze Star with V device, Air Medal with combat device. She paused, looking up at Angela with something approaching awe. Combat Medical Badge. What's a Combat Medical Badge? Tiny asked nervously. Doc Peterson answered before Angela could. It means she saved lives under enemy fire. It means she flew into combat zones where people were dying and brought them out alive. It means she's seen more action than everyone in this room combined. Angela felt the familiar weight of those memories settling on her shoulders. 9 years of flying into places where death waited behind every corner. 9 years of patching up wounded soldiers while bullets flew overhead and rockets exploded around the landing zones. 9 years of bringing warriors home. The 160th doesn't take just anybody, Agent Kim observed. How does someone go from Special Operations Flight Medic to civilian emergency room nurse? Angela's laugh was bitter. Same way anyone transitions out of the military. One day you're saving lives in Kandahar, the next day you're filling out insurance paperwork in Kansas City. But Tank wasn't buying it. Nah, there's more to it than that. Special ops don't just walk away. Something happened. Angela's hands were shaking now, but not from fear, from rage. You want to know what happened? I'll tell you what happened. My last mission, we were extracting a wounded Navy SEAL team from a compound in Helmand Province. Taliban had them pinned down, casualties mounting, time running out. She paused, the memories flooding back whether she wanted them or not. We went in under heavy fire, landed in a hot zone with rockets and machine gun fire coming from 3 directions, loaded 6 wounded warriors, and started to lift off. Agent Kim was listening intently, but she was also coordinating with her team through hand signals. The federal operation was continuing around them, but everyone was focused on Angela's story. What happened? Doc Peterson asked quietly. RPG hit us at 50 feet, Angela continued, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. Pilot died instantly. Co-pilot broke his back. I had 6 wounded SEALs, 2 dead aircrew, and a helicopter that was going down hard. Tank had moved closer, drawn by the story despite himself. What did you do? What I was trained to do. Kept everyone alive until rescue arrived. 3 hours in hostile territory with no air support, no backup, and Taliban fighters trying to overrun our position. Angela's voice was matter-of-fact, but her eyes held depths of pain that spoke volumes. Lost 2 of the SEALs, saved 4, got a medal for it. But that's not why you left, Agent Kim observed. Angela shook her head. No, I left because of what happened after. Military wanted to cover up the intelligence failure that led to that mission, wanted to classify everything so deep that the families of the men who died would never know the truth. The room was silent except for the distant sound of motorcycles being started and federal agents giving orders. But inside the clubhouse, 20 people were absorbed in a story that was reshaping everything they thought they knew about the small woman in blood-stained scrubs. I refused to sign the classification agreement, Angela continued. Told them the families deserved to know how their sons died. Military gave me a choice, sign the papers or face court-martial for insubordination. So you signed, Tank said. So I walked away, Angela corrected. Took an honorable discharge and started over. Found a place where I could still save lives without having to lie about the cost. Agent Kim's radio crackled again, this time with news that changed the entire dynamic of the situation. Team leader, this is Control. We have confirmation that Detective Morales is alive. Repeat, Detective Morales is alive and in federal custody. The words hit the room like a physical blow. Viper, who had been resigned to murder charges, suddenly straightened up. What? But you said... We said Detective Morales was found dead, Agent Kim corrected. We didn't say it was actually Detective Morales. Angela was staring at the FBI agent with growing understanding. This whole thing was a setup. Not a setup, Agent Kim clarified. An operation. Detective Morales went underground when his cover was blown. We needed to flush out the people responsible for compromising a federal investigation. Tank's face was cycling through confusion, anger, and something that might have been relief. You mean nobody's dead? Oh, someone's definitely dead, Agent Kim replied grimly. But it wasn't Detective Morales. The body we found was Miguel Santos, a known associate of cartel operations who had been feeding information to your club about federal investigations. The implications hit Viper like a freight train. Santos is dead? Tortured and executed by persons unknown, Agent Kim confirmed. We suspect he was killed by the same cartel contacts who had been paying him for information. Turns out, betraying federal investigations is a dangerous business. Snake finally found his voice. So, what does that mean for us? Agent Kim smiled, but it wasn't a pleasant expression. It means we've been watching your club for 8 months, recording conversations, tracking financial transactions, documenting every connection to interstate drug trafficking and money laundering. She gestured to her tactical team. It means tonight wasn't about arresting one person for murder. Tonight was about rolling up an entire criminal organization. Angela watched the federal operation unfold around her with professional appreciation. It was well-coordinated, methodical, and overwhelming in its scope. Club members were being separated and questioned, evidence was being collected, and the entire structure of the Red Wolf Motorcycle Club was being dismantled piece by piece. But her attention was drawn to Doc Peterson, who was standing apart from the chaos, studying her with an expression of deep respect and growing understanding. "Ma'am," he said quietly, "I need to ask you something." Angela nodded for him to continue. "When you walked in here tonight, you knew this was federal. You knew Tommy was safe. You knew exactly what you were doing." Doc paused, his weathered face creasing with admiration. This wasn't a desperate mother looking for her son. This was an operation. Angela met his gaze steadily. "Tommy is my son, Everything I said about that was true, but you're right about the rest. Agent Kim was listening now, her attention divided between coordinating the raid and understanding Angela's role in the evening's events. I've been working with federal investigators for 6 months, Angela admitted, providing medical expertise about trauma patterns, helping identify victims of violence, consulting on cases involving veterans. But tonight was different, Agent Kim observed. Tonight was personal, Angela confirmed. When Tommy called and said he was in trouble, when he mentioned seeing something at the garage, I knew he'd stumbled into the middle of a federal investigation. So, I called Agent Kim and volunteered to help. Tank was staring at her in disbelief. You mean this whole thing was planned? The gun, the threats, all of it? The gun was real, Angela said firmly. The threats were real. If any of you had actually hurt Tommy, if you'd refused to cooperate with federal agents, I would have used whatever force was necessary to protect my son. Doc Peterson was nodding slowly. But you knew he was safe. I knew he was probably safe, Angela corrected, but I needed to be sure, and I needed to draw out anyone who might have been involved in compromising Detective Morales' investigation. Agent Kim's radio crackled with another update. Team leader, we have confirmation of 12 arrests, multiple charges including racketeering, money laundering, and conspiracy to distribute controlled substances. But as the federal agents processed club members and secured evidence, Angela noticed something that made her tactical instincts flare. Bone Martinez, the road captain who had been trying to play peacemaker all evening, was slowly edging toward a side door that didn't appear to be covered by the tactical team. Without thinking, Angela moved to intercept him. Bone, I wouldn't. The road captain froze, his hand inches from the door handle. Ma'am, I just need some air. This is all a bit overwhelming. The door is wired, Angela lied smoothly. Federal agents don't leave exits unmonitored during operations like this. Bone's face went pale, but he stepped away from the door. What he didn't know was that Angela had spotted the outline of a concealed weapon beneath his leather jacket, and his movements toward the exit had all the hallmarks of someone planning to destroy evidence or warn Confederates. Agent Kim had noticed the interaction and was moving closer. Mr. Martinez, is there something you'd like to tell us? Nothing to tell, Bone replied, but his voice lacked conviction. Angela studied his face with the clinical assessment she'd learned from years of triage medicine. Reading people's true condition when they were trying to hide pain, fear, or deception was a skill that transferred well from combat zones to civilian emergencies. Bone, she said quietly, you've got about 30 seconds to decide whether you want to be part of the solution or part of the problem. What do you mean? Angela gestured toward the chaos around them. This operation has been planned for months. Every conversation has been recorded. Every financial transaction has been tracked. The only question now is whether you want to cooperate with federal investigators or go down with the ship. Agent Kim was watching the exchange with professional interest. Mrs. Martinez makes a good point, Mr. Martinez. We have enough evidence to prosecute everyone in this room, but cooperation can make a significant difference in sentencing. Bone looked around the clubhouse at his fellow club members being processed by federal agents. Some were maintaining their silence, others were already talking to investigators, and a few looked like they were on the verge of panic. What kind of cooperation? He asked carefully. The kind that helps us understand how cartel money was being laundered through motorcycle club operations, Agent Kim replied. The kind that identifies other clubs that might be involved in similar activities. Angela could see the internal struggle playing out on Bone's face. Loyalty to his club versus self-preservation. Fear of retaliation versus fear of federal prison. It was a decision that would define the rest of his life. I need to think about it, he said finally. You have exactly as long as it takes for us to finish processing evidence, Agent Kim warned. After that, cooperation becomes much less valuable. As if summoned by the mention of evidence, one of the tactical team members approached Agent Kim with a tablet showing security footage. Ma'am, you need to see this. Angela found herself looking over the agent's shoulder at surveillance video from the garage across the street. The timestamp showed Tuesday night, and the footage clearly showed Tommy working late, apparently unaware that he was being watched. There, the tactical officer pointed. 11:07 p.m. Subject observes meeting between Detective Morales and unknown male subject in club parking lot. On the grainy video, they could see Tommy stepping outside the garage, apparently to take out trash. But instead of going back inside, he moved closer to the fence separating the garage from the club property. His body language suggested he was trying to hear the conversation taking place between two men near the motorcycles. 11:15 p.m., the officer continued. Subject uses cell phone, presumably to call for help. Angela's heart clenched as she watched her son make the decision that would put him in federal protection and her through 72 hours of hell. But she was also proud. Tommy had seen something wrong and called for help instead of ignoring it. 11:17 p.m., the officer noted. Federal agents arrive and secure the witness. The video showed two unmarked vehicles pulling up to the garage. Tommy appeared to be expecting them, suggesting he had been in contact with law enforcement before that night. Within minutes, he was in a federal vehicle and driving away from what would have been a very dangerous situation. Agent Kim turned to Angela. Your son has been remarkably helpful to our investigation. His witness testimony is going to be crucial in prosecuting not just the local operation, but the larger cartel network. Is he safe? Angela asked. Really safe? As safe as federal protection can make him, Agent Kim assured her. And after tonight, much safer. Rolling up this operation eliminates most of the immediate threat to his safety. But even as the agent spoke, Angela's tactical instincts were telling her that something was still wrong. The federal operation was too smooth, too perfectly coordinated. Either they had been planning this for much longer than 8 months, or there were elements to the situation that she wasn't seeing. Doc Peterson had moved closer to the conversation, his own instincts apparently picking up on the same undercurrents. Agent Kim, ma'am, how long have federal agencies been watching this club? The FBI agent hesitated for just a moment, but it was enough to confirm Angela's suspicions. Longer than 8 months, she admitted. How much longer? Agent Kim glanced around the room, apparently calculating how much information she could safely reveal. The Red Wolf Motorcycle Club has been under federal surveillance for 3 years. Detective Morales was just the most recent undercover operation. Angela felt pieces of a much larger puzzle clicking into place. Tommy didn't stumble into this investigation. He was targeted. Not targeted, Agent Kim corrected. Protected. We've been aware that the garage across the street was being used to launder money through fake repair invoices. We've also been aware that the cartel was looking for ways to pressure local businesses into cooperation. The implications were staggering. You knew Tommy was at risk. We knew everyone in the area was at risk, Agent Kim replied. That's why we had protection protocols in place. That's why, when Tommy called 911 Tuesday night, federal agents were able to respond within minutes. Tank, who had been listening to the exchange, suddenly exploded. You people have been playing games with our lives for 3 years, setting us up, manipulating situations, using civilians as bait? Agent Kim's expression hardened. We've been investigating a criminal organization that has been responsible for millions of dollars in drug trafficking, dozens of violent crimes, and corruption of local law enforcement. If civilians got caught in the crossfire, it's because they chose to associate with criminals. But Angela was thinking about something else entirely. Agent Kim, when I called you tonight and said I was going to the club, what did you think was going to happen? The FBI agent's silence was answer enough. You expected me to get hurt, Angela said flatly. You expected this to go bad. We expected you to provide a distraction while we moved into position, Agent Kim admitted. We did not expect you to walk in armed and take control of the situation. Doc Peterson was staring at Agent Kim with growing anger. Ma'am, with all due respect, you used a decorated combat veteran as bait without telling her the full scope of the operation. Mrs. Martinez volunteered to help, Agent Kim defended. She was fully briefed on the risks, but not on the federal surveillance, the 3-year investigation, or the fact that her son was being used as a witness in a major cartel prosecution, Angela shot back. The tension between Angela and Agent Kim was becoming palpable. Two strong women, both accustomed to being in control, both discovering that the other had been operating with incomplete information. It was Snake who broke the silence. So, what happens now? Do we all go to federal prison, or do some of us get deals for cooperating? Agent Kim turned her attention back to the club members. That depends entirely on how much cooperation we get and how valuable that cooperation proves to be. But Angela was already thinking beyond the immediate situation. Tommy's testimony puts him at risk from cartel retaliation. Federal protection is temporary. What's the long-term plan for keeping him safe? Witness protection if necessary, Agent Kim replied. New identity, relocation, federal support for starting over. Angela felt her world shifting beneath her feet. Everything she'd built in Kansas City, her job, her life, Her identity as a civilian might be about to disappear. If Tommy needed witness protection, she would go with him, no question, but it would mean leaving behind everything familiar and starting over again. "How long do I have to decide?" she asked. "The threat assessment will take 48 hours, Agent Kim replied. "After that, we'll know better what level of protection is required." As federal agents continued processing evidence and questioning club members, Angela found herself looking around the clubhouse that had been the center of so much drama. In a few hours, it would be empty, sealed by federal investigators, transformed from a gathering place into a crime scene. Doc Peterson approached her one more time. "Ma'am, I want you to know that what you did tonight took incredible courage. Walking in here not knowing whether your son was alive or dead, facing down armed men who could have killed you, that's the kind of bravery they give medals for." Angela's smile was tired but genuine. "Doc, I've got enough medals. What I need is for my son to be safe and for this nightmare to be over." "It will be," Doc assured her, "and when it is, you'll have a place in the veteran community, people who understand what you've been through, what you've sacrificed." As if on cue, Agent Kim's radio crackled with the news Angela had been waiting for. "Team leader, this is transport. Package is secure and requesting to speak with Bravo 7. Angela's heart leaped. Package was obviously Tommy, and Bravo 7 had to be her call sign for the operation. Agent Kim handed her the radio. "Channel 3, keep it brief." Angela switched to the designated frequency and keyed the microphone. "Bravo 7 here." "Mom?" Tommy's voice came through the static, and Angela nearly collapsed with relief at hearing her son's voice. "I'm here, baby. I'm here." "Are you okay? Agent Rodriguez said you went to the club." "Mom, that was so dangerous." "I'm fine," Angela interrupted. "Are you hurt? Are you safe?" "I'm safe. Federal agents have been taking good care of me. But Mom, I'm so sorry I got you involved in this. I just saw something I shouldn't have seen, and I didn't know what else to do." Angela's voice was thick with emotion. "You did exactly the right thing. You called for help instead of ignoring it. I'm proud of you." "When can I see you?" Agent Kim held up 2 fingers. 2 hours, Angela relayed. "Agent Kim says we can be reunited in 2 hours." "I love you, Mom." "I love you too, Tommy. More than you'll ever know." Angela handed the radio back to Agent Kim, feeling as if a massive weight had been lifted from her shoulders. Tommy was alive, he was safe, and in 2 hours she would be able to hold her son and confirm with her own eyes that he was unharmed. But even as relief flooded through her, Angela's tactical mind was already thinking about the future. The federal investigation would continue. Tommy's testimony would be required. There would be trials, appeals, and years of legal proceedings. Most importantly, there would always be the possibility of retaliation from cartel operations that extended far beyond one motorcycle club in Kansas City. Agent Kim seemed to read her thoughts. "Mrs. Martinez, I want you to know that federal protection extends to family members of key witnesses. If you choose to relocate, you'll have full support for starting over wherever you feel safest." Angela looked around the clubhouse one more time, at Doc Peterson, who had become an unexpected ally, at Tank and Snake, and the other club members who had started the evening as antagonists but ended it as something approaching allies, at Agent Kim, whose federal investigation had saved her son's life but also turned their world upside down. "Agent Kim," she said finally, "I have one question." "Yes, ma'am?" "When this is all over, when the trials are finished and the cartel is prosecuted and Tommy is permanently safe, will we be able to go home?" Agent Kim's expression was gentle but realistic. "That depends on a lot of factors we won't know for months. But, Mrs. Martinez, sometimes home isn't a place. Sometimes it's the people you choose to protect and the principles you choose to live by." Angela nodded, understanding the truth in those words. She'd learned that lesson in Afghanistan, where home became wherever her unit was stationed. She'd learned it again in Kansas City, where home became the emergency room where she saved lives. Now, she was about to learn it a third time, wherever the road led next. As federal agents finished their work and began preparing to transport prisoners and evidence, Angela gathered her few personal belongings. The torn scrubs, the empty holster, the military service card that had changed everything. Doc Peterson stopped her at the door. "Ma'am, before you go, I want you to have something." He pressed a challenge coin into her hand. It was worn and scratched, but the design was still visible, an eagle clutching a wrench, with Red Wolf MC inscribed around the edge. "Doc, I can't—" "You can and you will," he interrupted. "Tonight you walked into our house and showed us what real courage looks like. You reminded us that service doesn't end when you take off the uniform. You deserve to be remembered here." Angela closed her fingers around the coin, feeling its weight and the history it represented. "Thank you." "Thank you," Doc replied, "for showing an old veteran that heroes come in many forms." As Angela walked toward the exit, Agent Kim fell into step beside her. "Mrs. Martinez, there's one more thing you should know." "What's that?" "The federal investigation didn't just focus on this club. We've been looking at veteran services, making sure that former military personnel have access to proper support and resources." Agent Kim paused. "Your medical expertise, your tactical experience, your ability to work under pressure, those skills are valuable to federal agencies." Angela looked at her sharply. "Are you offering me a job?" "I'm saying that when you decide what comes next, you'll have options. Consulting work, contract positions, opportunities to serve your country in new ways." They reached the door of the clubhouse, and Angela paused to look back one more time. The place where she'd thought she might die tonight was now just an empty room with overturned chairs and the lingering smell of cigarettes and fear. "Agent Kim," she said finally, "ask me again in 48 hours. After I've held my son and know for sure he's safe. After I've had time to process everything that's happened tonight." "Fair enough," Agent Kim replied. "But Mrs. Martinez, tonight you proved that warriors don't stop being warriors just because the battlefield changes. Sometimes the most important fights happen in places you never expected." Angela stepped out into the cool night air, breathing deeply for the first time in hours. Behind her, the Red Wolf Motorcycle Club was being transformed into a federal crime scene. Ahead of her, an uncertain future filled with legal proceedings, protection protocols, and decisions that would reshape her life and Tommy's. But for the first time in 72 hours, she felt something approaching peace. Her son was safe. Justice was being served, and she had rediscovered something about herself that 5 years of civilian life had nearly buried. She was still a warrior. The battles were different now, fought with medical knowledge instead of weapons, with determination instead of explosives. But the core mission remained the same: protect the innocent, serve the greater good, and never leave anyone behind. Angela's encrypted phone buzzed with an incoming message. She glanced at the screen and saw a text from an unknown number. "Mrs. Martinez, we have another family situation. Federal protection needed. Children at risk. Can you assist? Agent Kim." Angela looked up at the stars barely visible through the city's light pollution, thinking about choices and consequences, about duty and family, about the different ways a person could serve their country and their community. She typed back, "Send coordinates, en route." As she walked toward her car, Angela felt the challenge coin Doc Peterson had given her pressing against her palm. Behind her, the sound of motorcycles starting up echoed through the night as federal agents coordinated the complex logistics of a major investigation. Ahead of her, Tommy was waiting in a safe house, probably worried and confused but alive and unharmed. And somewhere beyond that, other families in crisis were waiting for someone with the skills and courage to help them navigate dangers they never should have faced. Angela Martinez, emergency room nurse, former flight medic, decorated combat veteran, and mother, climbed into her car and started the engine. The night was far from over, but for the first time in 3 days, she was driving towards solutions instead of problems. Her phone rang as she pulled out of the parking lot. Agent Kim's voice came through the speaker, professional but tinged with something that might have been respect. "Mrs. Martinez, I just wanted you to know what you did tonight, the way you handled yourself under pressure, the courage you showed walking into an unknown situation to protect your son. That's exactly the kind of person federal agencies need." Angela smiled, feeling something she hadn't experienced in years. Not just relief or satisfaction, but purpose. The sense that she was exactly where she needed to be, doing exactly what she was meant to do. "Agent Kim," she replied, "some battles you fight with scalpels, others with courage, but you never stop fighting for the people who matter." As Angela drove through the empty streets toward a reunion with her son and an uncertain but hopeful future, the Red Wolf Motorcycle Club faded into her rearview mirror. But the lessons of the night, about courage, about justice, about the different ways a warrior could serve, would stay with her forever. The phone buzzed again with another message. Additional federal contracts available. Veteran Family Protection Services. Interested parties report to FBI field office Monday, 0800 hours. Angela Martinez had spent 9 years serving her country in combat zones around the world. She'd spent 5 years serving her community in civilian emergency medicine. Now, she was about to begin serving in a new way, protecting families caught in the crossfire of federal investigations and criminal conspiracies. Some people never found their true calling. Others discovered it multiple times, each iteration building on the last, each challenge revealing new depths of strength and purpose. As she turned onto the highway leading toward the safe house where Tommy waited, Angela realized that her real journey was just beginning.
The stories end here, but the journey continues. Many new episodes are waiting for you. And if you enjoy, please take a moment to like, subscribe to our EV Story channel, and turn on the bell. See you in the next story.